Good morning, everyone. Myself, Satya. I welcome you all for this AWS associate level training. To receive the regular updates about this training, please do subscribe to this channel and enable the notification. So if you like the content, do comment, share, like it, and subscribe to this channel. Okay, we are on day 7. Today's class will cover a variety of important topics. So the agenda for today's class is displayed on your screen. So the first topic for today is IAM, Identity and Access Management. So what is all about IAM? Identity and Access Management is a web service that enables AWS customers to manage users and user permissions in AWS Cloud. So it is used to configure users, permissions, and roles, allowing you to grant or deny access to various AWS platform components such as compute, storage, database, application services, etc. So when you create an AWS account, you begin with one sign-in identity that has complete access to all AWS services and resources in the account. So this identity is called AWS accounts root user. And how do we access this root user? By signing in with the email address and the password that you provided at the time of creating the user account. So IAM systems typically integrate with many systems. This includes directories such as Active Directory, Open LDAP, local accounts on systems such as Unix or Linux-based systems, Oracle, MySQL, access rights in applications ranging from on-premises databases like SAP or Oracle EBS to cloud-hosted apps such as Salesforce.com, Concur, and many more. What does that mean? Though IAM, Identity and Access Management, it gives users to create and manage the permissions in AWS Cloud. These credentials can be integrated with Microsoft's Active Directory. Let us say you have on-premises data center that has Microsoft Windows operating system installed server. Of course, that comes with Active Directory. You have so many user accounts, password already created in your on-premises data center, correct? Similarly, when you try to have a hybrid cloud, you want to have an extension of your database in the cloud. In the cloud, you will have AWS. So in the cloud, you have AWS. In the on-premises, you have Windows server. So both these can be integrated. So IAM gives an extension support in integrating the Active Directory username and passwords, allowing the same user account password created in Active Directory, using them in AWS environment. Similarly, LDAP, if you are using other than Active Directory, suppose you are using LDAP in your environment, those LDAP credentials can be synced with IAM in the cloud. Similarly, if you are using a Linux or Unix operating system, of course, that comes with its own usernames, a credential, or Oracle database, a MySQL database, applications. All these applications or databases will have its own username and passwords, right? To log in, you already have existing setup. Hundreds or thousands of your employees, their credentials are already created. They're using their username and password. So the moment you extend your on-premises data center to cloud, the existing user credentials, what you are using, the same thing can be synced with IAM in the cloud. That is what it means. Any doubts here, friends?
No, sir.
Okay. Next, what are all the best practices of IAM? Please do not use your AWS root account credentials for daily use. Also, do not share them with anyone. This is one of the best practice. Make an IAM user for yourself. provide administrative privileges and use it for all of your daily tasks. So IAM user accounts are global entities. That means they are not tagged to a particular region or availability zone. Users can access AWS services from any region or location. So AWS provides IAM services at no extra cost. It is completely free. You will only be charged for the use of other AWS services by these IAM users. What does that mean? Now you have a AWS root account. You will create a user profile for me, or for yourself, you will go ahead and create an EC2 instance. This EC2 instance is charged, or maybe an EBS, Elastic Block Storage, that you will create. This EBS is charged, or maybe you have created a SQL database server. This database server is charged, but the IAM user account, username, password, what you have created, that is completely free. There is no charges. All good? Any clarification? Okay. All right. The next comes IAM policies. A policy is an object in AWS. So when you associate it with an identity or resource, it defines their permissions. What does that mean? Here, an identity refers to the IAM user account that we create. Or a resource. What is that resource? It could be an API, application programming interface. So a policy can be attached to this either user account, IAM user account, or to an API. What needs that defines their permission, what it can do, what it cannot do. So permission in the policy determine whether the request is allowed or denied. So we can manage user access in AWS by creating policies and attaching them to a user or resource. So these policies are stored in AWS as JSON documents. So an IAM policy can be attached or applied in 3 different ways. By adding a user to a group, that means the policies associated with that group will be applicable to all the users within that group. So if 10 users are added to a group, if that group is an admin group with all the administrative privileges, all the 10 users in that group will enjoy those administrative privileges. Next, another way of applying a policy is copy that permission from an existing user to the new user. Say, for example, now I'm a user having the administrative privileges. When you are creating the next user, you can copy the permission directly from my user account to the new user account. That means both of us need not be added into a group. That group has got admin rights. So user identity can have a separate policy attached directly into it. This is the second method. The third method is attaching existing policy directly to the user. That is what we just touched upon. So we'll be performing all these exercises in a couple of minutes so that you'll be able to understand better. So what are the limitations? You can attach up to 10 managed policies to an IAM user. That means when you are creating a user, you can attach 10 managed policies. The policy could be the policy number 1, administrative rights for managing database, all kind of databases. Policy number 2, administrative rights for managing the Active Directory. Policy number 3 could be managing administrative rights for managing EC2 instances. Policy number 4 could be managing VPN, virtual private network. Likewise, 10 managed policies can be attached to a single IAM user. That is limitation number 1. Next, limitation number 2. An IAM user can be assigned to a maximum of 10 groups. Okay, we just spoke about a group, right? We will create a group name called admin. To this admin group, we can attach 10 managed policies. Similarly, we can create a IAM user, create 10 policies to the user. So here the second one is an IAM user can be assigned to a maximum of 10 groups. That means logically, an IAM user can have up to 110 policies attached to them. How? To begin with, an IAM user comes with 10 managed policies that we can add, correct? Next, this IAM user can be included in 10 different groups. So each group will have 10 policies, correct? 10 into 10, 100 plus 10 managed policies, what this IAM user got. So in total, 110 policies can be attached to a single IAM user. So last but not least, in an AWS root user account can have up to 5,000 IAM users. That means if you have a business organization and you're managing your resources, data center, employee database, everything in AWS cloud, you can have 5,000 user login, user access to your environment. So anything over 5,000, you'll have to create another AWS root user account. So this is all about the IAM policies. We will move on to the next topic. Before that, any doubts, clarification needed? Please be vocal.
Sir, how many IAM users can we have per subscription?
That is 5,000.
So if it is beyond 5,000, then we need to have a different subscription.
Exactly, that's correct.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So anything else?
No, sir.
All right, good. So we'll move on to the next topic. The next topic is IAM groups. We just touched upon IAM group. We'll go in detail, in depth about individual topics, whatever we have touched upon so far. So an IAM user group is a collection of IAM users. So user groups let you specify permissions for multiple users, which can make it easier to manage the permissions for those users. So to understand in depth, let us take an example. You could have a user group called admins and give that user group administrator permissions. So any user in that user group automatically has admin group permissions, right? Because we have already attached those administrator permission policy to this group. So this user is there within that group. So if a new user joins your organization or your team and needs administrative privileges, we can simply add that new user to this admin user group instead of attaching individual admin user policies to this user. So what if this person joins another team or leaves the organization? Instead of editing or removing permissions set to this user, simply remove that user from that admin group. So he will lose, that particular user loses all the administrative privileges. He simply becomes a user account in the system without any policies attached. That user cannot perform any activities other than just logging into AWS console. Got it? All good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So the next topic is IAM user, non-explicit user, and a root user. What is the three different types of users and what is the difference? We will find out. An IAM user is an entity, represents a person or an application that uses to interact with AWS resources. So an IAM user will be able to do tasks on basis of policies attached. What does that mean? If a policy like user access policy is attached, that particular IAM user can perform only the user level access. He or she cannot perform the administrative access. He or she cannot create a EC2 instance, but they will be able to see what is going on with the EC2 instance. They may be able to log in and get the logs. Okay. Other than that, they will not be able to do. They cannot stop or start the EC2 instance. They cannot terminate an EC2 instance. That is what the policy attached. So an user in AWS consists of name and credentials. So that is what we will see while creating a new user account. We need to provide the name and the password. So when an IAM user is created and is not having any policy attached to it, in that case, this user will not be able to access any of the AWS services until a policy has been attached to it. This type of user is called non-explicit deny for IAM users. They are called non-explicit users because they do not have any policies attached. They are just having the username and the password to log into that system, but they cannot perform any activity. So the last but not least, a root user. A root user will have access to entire AWS environment and it will not have any policy attached to it. So this user account is the administrator for the AWS account. So the root user account is the one that gets created when you sign in to AWS Management Console. So an IAM user with administrative privileges is not the same as AWS account root user. Please note this point. What does that mean? Now the root user account, what you log in with the email address and the password, that account is not the same as the new another AMI user that you create with all the administrative privileges that you add. Both are not same because the AWS root user account is the supreme. That account can delete the administrative account what you have created. The same thing is not vice versa, not possible. The administrative account cannot delete the root user account. Got it? You cannot close the administrator account cannot close the AWS account that you have created. The administrator account cannot look into the billing section, cannot see what is the billing, what are the charges that has been levied upon the account. Correct? Same time, the administrator account what you have created, they can create further additional IAM users. They can create policies, the custom based policies. They can add rules. They can do anything and everything except the top level control. Deleting the account itself, not possible. Looking into billing section is not possible. Got it? All good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. We'll move on to the next topic. IAM roles and policies. IAM roles are for AWS services where we can assign permission of some AWS service to other service. Example, giving a simple storage service S3 permission to EC2 instance to access the S3 bucket contents. That means from EC2 instance, we can access for uploading or downloading contents into the S3 bucket. So from one service to another service, we can assign roles. That is what IAM roles. So it is a set of permissions that grant access to perform specific actions and to use resources in AWS. So it is also an AWS identity with permission policies that determine what the identity can do and what it cannot do. We will check all these things, minute, micro level things while performing the lab exercise so that we will have better understanding. So the next comes IAM policies. We were just discussing about this, right? IAM policies are meant for users and groups where we can assign permission to a user, also to a group. So permissions in the policies determine whether the request is allowed or denied. Example, giving permission to a user to access S3 buckets or giving permission to a user to access EC2 instance related activities. So that means this user has got access only to S3 bucket and the EC2 instance. Suppose you want this user to perform some virtual private networking activities, he or she cannot perform. Suppose this user want to perform attaching or detaching EBS, it is not possible because we have not given that policy or permission. All good? Shall we move on to the next topic? Okay, the next topic is permission boundaries. It is an advanced IAM feature that specifies the maximum permission that an identity-based policy can grant to an IAM entity, which can be either users or roles. What does that mean? All this while we discussed about roles and policies, right? There, once again, you can fine tune those policies. Some of the rules within that policy can be deleted, can be altered, can be modified. That is what the permission boundaries. You can go to the micro level. So when a permission boundary is set for an entity, that entity can only perform the actions that are allowed by both its identity-based policies and its permission boundaries. So using a permission boundary, you can ensure that those new IAM roles can only access certain actions or resources. For example, I had given access to a user for EC2 instance, but in the EC2 instance, I want this user only to launch instance, but cannot stop or terminate. This is a micro level, but the default permission that is provided by Amazon, it says the user can access EC2, means end to end, all the access in EC2. But I want to tailor make that permission. I want to remove some of the permissions that can be achieved here. So in a particular AWS region, say, I want to assign a policy, I want to tailor make a policy to a particular user in my team. He or she should be able to access resources only in Asia Pacific or Singapore region, not another region, so that I can do it. All right. So this is micro level settings that we can assign to through permission boundaries. This is like this feature allows others to perform tasks on behalf of you within a specific boundary or permission that you set. See what happens in a real-time scenario. As a root user account, I don't have time. I'm the owner of the company. I cannot look into creating new user accounts, managing their policies, rules, roles, permission, everything, right? So I will assign a 3 or 4 administrators. I will allow them to perform the tasks on behalf of me. These administrators will go ahead and create new team members, name, their username policies. They will create the applications that will interact on behalf of the employees or the users. They will go ahead and do all the micro level setting of permission boundaries, everything. Here, once again, these administrators cannot go beyond the boundary what I have set. If I have set, the administrator can create roles, create user accounts only meant for a particular service. They can only perform. They can only create user to access those services, not all the services. Okay, so this is something like delegating the authority. You can also use this for delegating your work to your employees or the administrators. So the next topic, what we have is password policy. We might have come across this particular password policy day in and day out, maybe while creating our Gmail user account, Facebook, Twitter, or maybe if you are in corporate environment, every 60 days or 90 days, your password will be getting expired. This is the password policy that we can set in AWS environment also. So to understand in detail, here we have the description. Password policy checks if the account password for an IAM user meets the specific requirements indicated in the parameter. So this rule is non-compliant if the account password policy does not meet the specific requirements. What does that mean? Let us say we will create a new user account. And we will check mark the box where it says the user has to change the password at the next login. So there we have set the password policy. There should be 8 or 10 characters, the password length, minimum character length. It should have uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and the password, will it expire or never expires? So all these things we can set. So accordingly, that user has to follow those password policy to make changes and to be in the system. That is what the password policy. So it is a set of rules designed to enhance computer security by encouraging users to employ strong passwords and use them properly. So the IAM password policy does not apply to the AWS root user account. Please underline this statement. The IAM password policy does not apply to the AWS root user account password or IAM user access keys as well. So the when we are creating an IAM user, we can select two types of access. One is access key through access key, programmatic access key, and another one is management console access. So programmatic access key is for the applications, APIs. So here API is also an IAM user. So if the password expires, the IAM user cannot sign into the AWS management console, but can continue to use their access keys. What does that mean? I have created an IAM user to perform a regular backup activity. This backup activity is performed by a API. Okay, that API is a AWS IAM user that I created. And I have set a password policy for this IAM, this API user account, 90 days. After the 90 days, the password expired. If you are the owner of that API, you cannot log into AWS Management Console, but the password what you have hard coded in your application calls for interacting between different applications or databases or EC2 instances, that will still be working. That will not stop functioning. So when you reset the password, that new password, once again, you will have to hard code in all your applications. So we have some parameters to meet while setting the password policy. So minimum password length can be 8 characters and maximum up to 128 characters. It should fall between these two. So the password length cannot be lesser than 8 characters or more than 128 characters. So minimum 3 combination of types, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols, either of them can be used to create our password. So here there are some special characters or symbols. You can use any of them. And not be identical to your AWS account name or email address. That means I have created a username called David. That David name cannot be in the password. That is what it means. So the last parameter to meet is reusing old passwords. It is prohibited. Actually, it is with the beginning password policy that comes with AWS, that is not there. We can include this. There are so many options to go with. We will explore all these things in the lab exercise very shortly so that we'll be able to understand much better. So any doubts, clarification in the slide, please be vocal. If not, we will move on to the next topic. I have another 1 or 2 slides to cover. Then we will move on to the lab exercise. All good?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Next comes inline policy. This is once again regarding the passwords. An inline policy is a policy that is embedded in an IAM identity, a single user, or group, or a role. So the policy is an inherent part of that identity. You can create a policy and embed an identity into it, either when you create an identity or later. So this inline policy comes with a JSON script So the inline policy characters limits are 2048 characters for users. That means a username what you have created, if you want to add an inline policy, you can type 2048 characters length of JSON document or the code. If it is for roles, it will be 10,240 characters. And if it is for groups, it is 5,120 characters. We will explore all these things, minute things, so that we'll be able to understand better. We can approach all these theoretical things from a practical way of approach in the lab exercise to understand much better. So the last but not least, the managed policy. A managed policy is an IAM policy which is created and administered by AWS. What does that mean? AWS provides default policies. There are about 800 to 1,000 managed policies created by AWS, default policies that are readily available. We can handpick any of those policies. These policies are called managed policies. So AWS provides managed policies for common use cases based on job function. Example, here you can see Amazon DynamoDB full access, or maybe AWS code commit power user, or maybe EC2 instance administrator access, or EC2 read-only access, or EC2 user access. These are all the managed policy that has been created by AWS. So if you expand these policies, you will see what are all the roles that can be performed by this policy holder or policy user. So these AWS provided policies allow you to assign appropriate permission to users, groups, and rules without having to rewrite that policy by yourself. AWS had provided everything almost like spoon feeding. They had provided everything which is needed for day-to-day use, thinking all the permutation and combination. We can just handpick and start using. Still, if you find any additional deletion, modification that need to be done, yes, that can be performed. A single managed policy can be attached to multiple user groups, users, groups, or roles within the same AWS account and across different accounts. So let's go and perform all these exercises to understand better in the lab. Okay, so with this, we'll be closing the theoretical part of identity and access management. We will explore these options and features in the lab.